Morning, everybody. Randy from Clearwood Paddleboards here. And this morning we're going to show you the basics of how to glue up a 7-piece laminated wood paddle shaft. We've already created the ribs here just to speed things up in this process of showing you how this works. And we're actually going to put this in the clamping jig dry without any glue on it. So basically, we're trying to illustrate just how this process works and how to achieve a really nice straight paddle shaft. So basically, we've got our 7-piece lamination here ready to go. We've got our clamping jig, which is nothing more than a 2x2 that we've secured to our flat assembly table. The main thing with this clamping jig setup is to get it down on the work surface so that it's really straight and true. And you can do that a couple of different ways. I've got a metal straight edge that I use to strike a line with. You can also use a carpenter's chalk box to snap a line. But the important thing is to get your clamping jig down straight and true. And if you do that, you'll eliminate most of the trouble that comes with laminating the shaft together. You want to end up with a really nice, straight, true shaft. So start out with a nice, straight jig, and you'll achieve that. So we've got our clamping jig. We've got our 7-piece lamination that we're going to wrap in wax paper, just so it doesn't stick to the clamping jig. And once we have our lamination glued up and wrapped in wax paper, then we bring our clamping caul, which is the component of the jig that we use to actually squeeze the laminations together. So that's a basic setup here. So essentially, what we want to do when we start this process, the way I do it, is I lay my parts out in such a way that everything stays in nice order. The worst thing is in this process really is if you get everything kind of ready to go into the jig and you find out you've got a piece out of sequence. So you want to make sure that you start in sequence and that you keep it in sequence. So basically, when I pre-saturate my strips, I'm just pulling them off the top of the pile, saturating a face, saturating another face, flipping that strip, saturating, flipping, and just going through the pile in that form. So basically, you'd have the entire pile pre-saturated. Then you reverse the process and use the thickened epoxy that actually acts as the final adhesive in the glue joint. So that's the way the process works. And as I say, the main thing is keep the strips organized, keep the ends organized so that you don't have any parts that are projecting out too far from the others. So essentially, that's the process. As far as how to achieve a glue joint that really works structurally, there's really two parts to the process. The pre-saturation is the part of the process that really gets the epoxy to soak into the wood. Then you come along with a thickened epoxy mixture that actually acts as the glue joint, and that's really important to get that part of it, mixed up and ready to apply in a form that is it's sort of brushable. It's not as thin as paint, but it's not as stiff as peanut butter, I guess would be the way I would describe it. So once you've got all of your epoxy material pre-saturated, all your strips are ready to go, you've got your thickened epoxy on one of the surfaces that are mating together for each lamination. You've got the entire bundle in your hand. Everything's all ready to go. You've got the ends brought together. Everything's clean. And basically what I do is I'll just roll it over, put it into my wax paper setup, making sure that everything is neat and tidy and organized. Okay, now I'm going to just make sure that I've got my wax paper wrapped over the top for the laminations. Then I'll bring my clamping caul up to the material that I'm all my strips and material I'm all clamping together. And then essentially with my clamping process, I'll start in the middle of the setup with just some very light pressure, just enough to hold the strips into place, make sure everything's all pushed down nice and tidy. And I'll just work my way along with the clamps right out to the end of this clamping arrangement, making sure that I don't over clamp anything, especially initially. Just want to get the clamps on there, make sure everything's sitting nice and tidy. So you've got even pressure, but still pretty light pressure on everything. You also want to make sure that you keep your clamps spaced fairly evenly. You know, I keep mine at probably, they're probably about 7 or 8 inches apart, I would say, on this entire process. So I'll work my way from the center out to one end, and then I'll work my way from the center out to the other end, making sure that I've got fairly even spacing as I go along this process. You don't want to over-tighten clamps, especially initially. Just want to get them on there, get some nice even pressure. Then once you've got your clamps on and everything is nice and tidy, then I'll go through with a hammer and a small block, or not. And just make sure all my strips are nicely seated and down tight against the assembly. And once I have everything nice and tight, then I'll go back to the center of my lamination and I'll add just a little pressure to that clamp. And I want to make sure that my clamps are centered top to bottom, so I get nice even pressure on my clampage. Then I'll go through making sure that they're all set up about the same, about halfway up the jig and about halfway up the caul. And I'll just essentially create as even a pressure as I can create by feel and how much torque I actually put on the part of the jig, or I'm sorry, the part of the clamp that tightens the clamp against the material. So, you know, nice even clamping pressure. It's really also important. It's also really important to make sure that you don't over clamp when you're using epoxy adhesives. You actually want to have some amount of glue joint in your final product. The glue joint, if it's starved for glue in an epoxy joint, it will be weaker than a joint that has some body to it. So, you know, we like to use Moss epoxies and their structural fillers, which we find to be just perfect for this kind of application. We also use other epoxies for other purposes, but we found that Moss for what we do here, especially in the hollow board construction and paddle manufacturing, is just the perfect epoxy for us. So anyway, that's the setup. Hope this helps. If you have any questions, you can reach me through my website at clearwoodpaddleboards.com. Thanks a lot.